Not every fan knows this, but Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the second installation in our favorite adventure series, is actually a prequel. It takes place in 1935, while the original, Raiders of the Lost Ark, takes place in 1936. Why is this important today? Because when I started a series covering the notable artifacts in the world of Indiana Jones, I started with the first one we see chronologically, the Cross of Coronado, which appears in the opening sequence of The Last Crusade. And I kind of feel like I should follow that pattern here. So, that leads to today's topic, the second artifact we see in the movies chronologically. From the streets of Shanghai in the opening sequence of the Temple of Doom, I present to you the Urn of Nurhaci.
This Nurhachi's a real small guy.
Like last episode, we're going to start with the real history. Nurhaci was born in 1559 as the grandson of Jiokanga, the chieftain of a mid-sized Jurchen tribe in the Changbai Mountains. The Jurchen people were a group of nomadic, low-intensity agriculturalists and pastoralists living in the periphery of the Ming dynasty in the region of Manchuria. And Nurhaci, being the son of a chieftain of a decent-sized tribe of Jurchens, spent most of his youth in the Ming-controlled territories of western Manchuria, where he received an education, became fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and learned much about Ming military and political strategy. This was mainly because the Ming had long practiced a policy of allying with and vassalizing the Jurchen tribes of Manchuria in order to maintain stability on the Ming's northeastern borders, while avoiding the difficult tasks of administering the many nomadic tribes that resided there. This was fairly effective for them, and by bringing the children of Jurchen nobles into their territory for education, they were able to strengthen their relationship with the tribes to a great degree. But that wasn't the only technique the Ming used to secure their border, as Nurhaci was about to learn. The Ming also strategically favored individual tribes with material and military aid as a method of inciting wars between the tribes, and keeping the Jurchen people as a whole relatively weak. And in 1582, Nurhaci's grandfather, Jiokanga, as well as his father, Taski, were both killed in a battle with one such favored tribe, led by a man named Nikan Wailan. This event left Nurhaci suddenly in charge, so at 23 years old, he took up his grandfather's mantle and declared war on Wailan's tribe. First, he wrote a letter, dictating demands to the local Ming authorities that Wailan was being supported by, demanding the return of his father's body, recognition of his status of chief, and the immediate turnover of Nikan Wailan personally to him. The Ming refused, so Nurhaci mobilized his warriors. In the beginning, he only had 13 suits of armor to his name, but he would soon turn those humble beginnings into a force to be reckoned with. In 1584, Nurhaci would begin his attack, attacking Wailan at the settlement of Turun, capturing much of the tribe's weapons and supplies, and forcing the rival chief to retreat deeper into his territory, where Nurhaci would eagerly pursue him. The war lasted until 1587, when Nurhaci finally forced Nikan Wailan out of his own territory and into the shelter of the Ming commander Li Chengliang. This time, though, when Nurhaci demanded the Ming turn over his enemy, they saw an opportunity to make another strong ally to take Nikan Wailan's place, so they handed him over, and Nurhaci beheaded his father's killer on the spot. Nurhaci then took up the position of the Ming's new favored ally in the region, attacking and subjugating the other Jurchen tribes with their support. The process was surprisingly quick, as Nurhaci was an excellent commander, and so he was able to gain control of the Jurchen's core territories by the end of 1588. So impressive were his victories that the Ming saw fit to bestow upon him the title of Assistant Commissioner-in-Chief in 1589, which doesn't sound like a very glorious title to us, but given the bureaucratic realities of the Ming Empire in its later years, this was quite the act of recognition. And after Nurhaci put down a Jurchen uprising led by the Yahe tribe in 1595, the Ming decided to up the ante, giving Nurhaci the much cooler sounding title of Dragon Tiger General. But this wasn't enough for Nurhaci. He still wanted more, so in 1599, he began cultivating even more power in a bid to unify all of the Jurchen tribes into a single Manchurian state. As his first step, he commissioned his advisors to create a new Manchu alphabet based on the Mongolian one in order to create the foundations of a Manchu-specific writing system, a necessary step if he was to create the kind of bureaucracy a large empire would need in order to ensure smooth governance. Which is also why, as his next step in 1601, Nurhaci created the 8-banner system. Of course, at this point, there were only 4 banners. The other 4 banners that the system was named for wouldn't be created until 1615, but nevertheless, the banner system was extremely important for Nurhaci's ambitions. The system would organize all of Nurhaci's warriors into 4 companies of 300 men, with each marching under a different brightly colored banner, either yellow, red, blue, or white. The men of each company would be sworn to the service of each banner, and the banners themselves would be given to men who were extremely loyal to Nurhaci, and most importantly, trusted by him. typically family members. This kind of structured organization was quite novel for the Jurchen tribes and allowed them to function much more cohesively than they otherwise would. But that's not all the banners did. They also functioned as a new administrative system, as the families of each soldier sworn to a banner, as well as their families, would also be placed under the authority of said banner. They would pay taxes to the bannermen, provide fighting men upon request, and render any kind of material support the banner needed. For all intents and purposes, the banner system was a kind of feudal system, creating lords that governed on behalf of Nurhaci and answered directly to him when he called. This new form of military governance allowed Nurhaci's budding state to flourish, and his forces quickly swelled. The number of warriors marching under each banner increased tremendously, forcing a reorganization of the banner's company into one banner of 7,500 men, which was divided into 5 regiments of 1,500 men, and each regiment was further subdivided into 5 companies of 300 men. But even this was not enough to contain the number of soldiers marching under Nurhaci's command, so he added the previously mentioned other 4 banners, this time bordered in red, or white in the case of the red banner, bringing the total up to 8 banners, with 60,000 men under them. This system would grow even further in later years, but it would remain an integral part of the organization of Nurhaci's future dynasty, lasting all the way until 1912. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In 1616, Nurhaci felt he had enough power and enough security to declare himself Khan of the newly created Jin dynasty, sometimes called the Manchu dynasty or the Latter Jin dynasty. He then prepared to expand his territory even further, out of Jurchen-held territory and into Ming territory. As justification, in 1618, Nurhaci created a document called the 7 Grievances, which outlined his reasons for invading the Ming. The reasons mainly revolved around the Ming's interference in Jurchen tribal affairs, and the many wars they caused by supporting one tribal group over another, or by sheltering rebels and marauders so long as they targeted tribes the Ming commanders disliked. Since these reasons all happened to be real grievances many Jurchen leaders agreed with, Nurhaci had his casus belli, and immediately invaded Ming territory. He quickly captured the city of Liaoyang, and kept going from there. In 1621, he moved his new state's capital to Liaoyang for easier control of the war effort, and in the same year he captured the even larger city of Shenyang, leading him to move his capital once again in 1625 to that city, where it would remain until the capture of Beijing in 1644. However, that was a ways off, and for now Nurhaci was still contained in Manchuria, though he did now control all of it. In order to continue his conquest of the Ming, Nurhaci would have to capture the fortified city of Ningyuan, which guarded the entrance to China proper. So, in 1626, he attempted to do just that. At first, things seemed to be going well. The local Ming commander, Yuan Chonghuan, only had 20,000 men with which to defend the city, and Nurhaci had at least 60,000 men to take it, with some sources claiming he had as many as 130,000 men. With that kind of numbers advantage, it could be expected that the city would fall quite quickly, but Nurhaci had made 2 miscalculations. For one, the city's defenders had not been idle over the last few years, while Nurhaci was conquering all of Manchuria. So now, Ningyuan was heavily fortified, with many prepared fighting positions and no buildings or covered positions of any kind left standing outside the city's walls. The defenders had burned everything back from the walls to give them clear lines of sight in all directions. That was important due to Nurhaci's second miscalculation. He underestimated the range of the Ming's new Portuguese cannons, and he accidentally set up his army's camp well within that range. As soon as the tents were pitched, the supplies brought in, and most importantly, as soon as Nurhaci's army's guard was down, the cannons opened fire, causing immense chaos and forcing Nurhaci to scramble to retreat. The Jin army suffered heavily due to that mistake, but they were still capable of fighting, so the next day, Nurhaci ordered a 2-pronged attack on the city. His men swarmed onto the city, with a large detachment of cavalry on one side and a large force of infantry with siege carts and archers on the other. However, the Ming cannons once again wreaked havoc on Nurhaci's forces, shredding his cavalry and grinding down the infantry's advance until nightfall, when they were forced to pull back. Attacks like this would continue for several days, and while there were some successes, the battle turned for the worse when Nurhaci himself was hit by a cannonball. Unable to continue due to the severity of the wound, Nurhaci was forced to order a retreat all the way back to Shenyang. Unfortunately, even in the capital with access to doctors and good medicine, Nurhaci's wounds stubbornly refused to heal, and after 8 months in various states of agony and illness, Nurhaci would finally pass away in September of 1626 at the age of 67. After his death, Nurhaci's son Abihai would take up the throne and rename his father's dynasty from Jin to Qing. He would then expand the Qing's control enormously, penetrating far into Ming territory and ensuring the Qing's eventual rise to dominance, though he too would die before it truly happened. In 1644, 1 year after Abihai's passing, his brother Dorgan, serving as regent of the child emperor Shunzi, Abihai's son, would finally take the Ming capital of Beijing, immediately occupying it as the new capital of the Qing dynasty, and officially cementing Nurhaci's bloodline as the ruling family of China. Ming rebels would persist, of course, but after this battle, Qing supremacy over China would go unchallenged for centuries, and the dynasty would last all the way until 1912, when it would finally fall to internal instability and close the book on the Chinese dynastic system. And it's at this point that our timeline branches from the Indiana Jones one. In Indy, Nurhaci is cremated after his death, possibly due to disfiguration from the cannon wounds, but any other explanation is certainly possible. After cremation, Nurhaci's ashes are placed in an intricate jade urn, decorated with intricate carvings of flowers and topped by a beautiful sculpture of a Feng Huang, a Chinese mythical creature similar in some ways to a phoenix. This urn is then carried with the Qing army as it marched into Ming territory, being brought into Beijing in 1644 by Nurhaci's son Dorgan, and enshrined within the city as a symbol of Nurhaci's ultimate victory over those who wronged him. Fast forward 300 years to 1903, and the Qing are in decline. Western influences have weakened the government, and now internal instability is threatening to shatter the Chinese state, as revolutionaries and reactionaries struggle for dominance. One such revolutionary, a man named Shen Chun, decides to strengthen his movement's legitimacy by stealing the urn. He breaks into the Forbidden City, locates the urn, takes it away in the dead of night, and runs to the port of Tianjin, making his escape aboard a fast ship named the Rising Moon. Unfortunately for him, the Rising Moon would encounter a massive storm and a sea serpent, causing the loss of all hands and running the ship aground on a small atoll off the coast of Baijiao, an island located to the southeast of the city of Shanghai. Sometime later, the urn would be discovered by salvagers and sold onto the black market, where it would make its way across the world, trading hands many times, and eventually ending up in a pawn shop in Istanbul, where it would be discovered by Indiana Jones. Indy, recognizing exactly what this urn was, would immediately acquire it, and shortly afterwards he would be contacted by a representative of a shady Chinese businessman operating out of Shanghai, Lao Che. Lao Che would offer to buy the urn, as he traced his own lineage back to Nurhaci, and as such placed great value on the prestige recovering such an artifact would grant him in the Chinese underworld. So much value that he was willing to offer an enormous diamond, the Peacock's Eye, as trade to Indy for the urn and its contents. As Indy had been searching for the Peacock's Eye for some time now at this point, he warily accepted, and made the journey to Shanghai, where he agreed to meet Lao Che at the famous Club Obi-Wan. Once in the city, Lao Che's son, Kao Kan, would make an attempt to kill Indiana and take the urn for himself, but Indy managed to fight him off, in the process removing one of Kao's fingers. And despite the obvious ill intention of his buyers, Indiana Jones would still go to Club Obi-Wan the following night to make the trade. Unfortunately for him, though, Lao Che was just as treacherous as his son, and Indy was forced to flee their meeting without either the diamond or the urn, and having lost a close friend.
Not this time, Indy. I followed you on many adventures into the great unknown mystery. I go first, Indy.
Thus, Lao Che would take possession of the urn of Nurhaci, placing it into his private collection where it possibly remains to this day. Or at least that's the last we've seen of it. Considering that the Peacock's Eye would surface again later, quite definitely not in Lao Che's collection, it is possible that he eventually lost the urn as well, but we may never know. Such are the realities of fictional archaeology. We can only learn as much as the sources allow, and unlike in real archaeology, there is no possibility of doing a physical dig to learn more. But speaking of the real world, there is one more very fun fact about Nurhaci that I want to share with you. We may never know where the urn of Nurhaci went in Indiana Jones's world, but we most definitely know where the body of Nurhaci is in ours. After his death, his body was entombed in the Fuling Mausoleum in Shenyang, which was his capital city at the time and the city in which he died. And that mausoleum still exists today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's open to the public. Yes, if you have a passport and enough freedom to fly to China, you can currently go and see the burial site of Nurhaci yourself for a very modest fee, about $6 at the time of writing. I know I'd love to go, and if this channel takes off, I just might, so be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that other YouTube stuff. It really helps us out. But with that, it looks like class is dismissed. Be sure to read chapters 3 and 5 for next time, and until then, I have been Austin, and this has been College of Lore. Thank you for watching.